Welcome to episode 16 of the Bishop on a Bike podcast. I am Jim Hazelwood, your host for these conversations. And in this episode, we're talking with Tim Gnaneswaran, who works with Mosaic Ministries based in Connecticut. And this is an organization that has roots in the Lutheran Church, and they work with people with intellectual disabilities. Tim has a fascinating life story, and you'll recognize right off the bat from his accent that he's not exactly from New England, but maybe another kind of England. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation, which is brought to you as we are each and every month by the Mission Investment Fund, and much gratitude to Jerry Lauro, the local representative here in the Northeast. But let's talk now with Tim Gnaneswaran of Mosaic Ministries.
But then in a way, my job is to put myself out of a job, you know? That's kind of how I see it, is to ultimately get an organization like Mosaic to a point where we have, say, the funding to do what we need to do. We have the volunteer support, the community support, the integration, the quality of services, that it takes care of itself. You know, like we call it sustainable fundraising. Ideally, that's what it would become, right? Is that it becomes you get enough support and engagement from, and you're so integrated in the community that it takes care of itself. That I don't need to go out and, you know, and people are so aware of people with intellectual disabilities and the needs that they have and how they can meet those needs. And, you know, communities and churches and businesses go, oh, we know what we need to do and this is how we do it, you know, and get that cause to that level that ultimately I don't need to be, you know. Huh. You just need someone to coordinate and go, okay, cool, here's what you would do. And, you know, so that's what I see my goal as, is to put myself out of a job. Ultimately, nice. You'll always find work.
So what struck me when Susan suggested that I talk to you is I remember an interaction you had when you came to convocation. Mm-hmm. And it was actually at a table that my wife was sitting at. Okay. And she said, you just painted this picture mm-hmm. of congregations really serving their community. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember that conversation, or that's probably just part of your thinking.
It probably was like a breakout group. Was it something like that? And we were talking about ideas. It was questions that you were kind of posed. Because I remember saying something, saying to the people at the table, I'm kind of the outsider here. Confession, like, I don't belong here, thanks for having me. But my vision from a non-profit point of view is really to see this church be something more than what we currently see it as. And that was and it was a whole picture of what I see the community being, because I'm passionate about that, just personally, is community development as a whole. So nothing happens on its own. So Mosaic doesn't become this great organization and the church is on the corner saying, oh wow, they've grown. Or the church doesn't suddenly become this great church out in the community. Mosaic is sitting here saying, I wonder how we could get, you know, the church involved, or how we could help. So it has to happen together. So it was just this unified goal. And the only way you can have that is if you really have people that are living their passions or living their purpose even. And that was this kind of picture that I was painting about in churches, how you have people, you know, we talk about, well, say the church, we don't have a lot of money to give to an organization or a cause. And for me, I'm saying, well, money is like the shallow view of how you can help, to be perfectly honest. Because as a person, your gifts, your talents, your resources are so much more than the money you have in your pocket, you know, or don't have in your pocket, because no one does cash anymore. And for me, that's what I've always believed in. And it's easy to say that to people. It's hard to get people to buy into that, because ultimately money talks in the world we're in. But I've seen it. I've seen fruit of it where people.
So what's an example of where you've seen it?
So it's almost like, so say in a church, you might say, I could come to a church and say, well, this is Mosaic. This is what we do. This is what we do in the community. Here's our shortfall, and we would label that as funding shortfall. Here's how you can help to help match that funding shortfall. And the church would go, we don't really have that kind of money, you know, or just a group of people might say, we don't really have that kind of money. I guess we can't help. And I'll go, we've totally missed the point of what this is. of what Mosaic is. Mosaic started out of the Lutheran Church. We're a social ministry out of the church. It didn't come from a place that had a ton of money. It came from someone who stood up and said, these are people that are, misrepresented, misunderstood, there's a stigma over this whole thing of intellectual disabilities. I'm just going to go out and love them and serve them regardless. And that's my purpose, that's my passion. Mosaic says, the tagline is we're embracing God's call to serve. And it's this idea of, this is my purpose. It's not just, there's a need, we should probably fill it. Like, this is what we're called to do. This is the purpose that we believe we're called to do. And we go out and we pursue that at any cost, like regardless.
So you come into a church rather than saying, here's what we're doing, do you have money to give to it? How's it different?
So then I believe everyone in your church, whether it is a minister or someone who's attending of the congregation, or a kid or someone who's just turned up and they don't really know what it's all about, has a purpose in their life. That's what I believe. You're here for a purpose, there's a cause, and I believe that's an integral part of the church, of the Bible, of the gospel. Like, I don't need to tell you that. So because I believe that, it makes sense to me that everyone in that church has a particular purpose, not just for that church, but for their community, for their family. And there are going to be people in that church that say, I feel my calling is to serve these people, this type of population group, whether it's kids, whether it's young adults, whether it's people with intellectual disabilities. And for me, my passion is to connect the two, is to marry the two and say, I want you to live your purpose. And for me to say, well, if you don't have money to be a monthly donor to Mosaic, you can't live your purpose. I've totally missed what God really put you on this earth to do. So that's kind of the vision that I have. So when I'm meeting people, it's not about saying, like, how can you really serve us? It's almost like saying, what do you believe is your purpose on earth? Because that's going to be so much more sustainable, when we talk about sustainable fundraising, than having someone give and maybe encourage them to join with us in what we're trying to do. People will do that, and people do it. But I really believe if I can help you discover your purpose, I'm empowering you, to live what God already asked you to do. And that's going to benefit the community as a whole. It's almost like if someone had given permission to one of the original founders of, Martin Luther Homes or Bethlehem Mission to say, it's okay for you to go out and take this crazy risk and serve these people and just do it out of the goodness of your heart. If no one had given them permission or they hadn't felt enabled to do it, we wouldn't be here today. And now, yes, we're funded by, tax dollars and by people and foundations and individuals who support us. And we're so much bigger in what we do, and we serve thousands of people across America. But they only started because someone felt called and allowed, permitted to carry out their purpose in the community. So that's what I see my job as, is to connect the two. So when I say, like, put myself out of a job, it's the idea of, if everyone's doing what they're meant to be doing, then I don't need to be the person going, hey guys, you guys need to do what you're meant to be doing, So that's really how I see it. That's my passion. So it's really saying to a group of people, whether it's in a church or an organization, what is your passion? Because at some point that may or may not, and I'm happy to let you go do what you're meant to do, but it may marry to what we're doing here at Mosaic. And if it does, I can't waste that opportunity.
Right.
So that's kind of.
And Mosaic works primarily with people with intellectual disabilities. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? Tell me what that's like.
I guess we break it down into 3 categories. So we talk about giving people a meaningful life. So that could be anything from the residential programs that we run. We call them group homes or community living, arrangements, where in the community there's individuals that are living in a group home that is essentially supported by Mosaic on every level. So with the staff 24/7, with transport, we're taking them to day programs or their jobs, or helping them interact with their families, or giving them that meaningful life. Isn't just hosting them, isn't just a food and a bed and a place to sleep in. It isn't that stuff. It's how can we give you these experiences? One of the things I love is that every individual has a plan. Here are your goals. Here's what we're trying to achieve this year, next year, in 5 years. This is where I want to see you. And that drives what we do. So it's not just like, did you eat today? Did you sleep? Like, did you get what you sort of needed? It's what are your desires? How can we empower you? So it's that, the first part is that meaningful life that I find is really most effective when we do this direct care that is strategic in the way that we serve people. Second part is caring communities. So we do that within a caring community. And I find that's a big part of what I do in terms of getting out there, is we can say, we've got homes in 25 homes throughout Connecticut, where we're serving people in all kinds of neighborhoods, all kinds of, towns. But the community has to know about our individuals to be able to care. And so it's not just the staff that are in the home. As much as they love the people we support and they pour out into them, it's really got to be more than that. It's just like I said, the purpose of what we're doing has to be so much bigger. We have to be so much more integrated in the community. I want people to know about what intellectual disabilities even are. There's so much of a stigma that's still attached to it. There's so much fear still attached to it. When we talk about people wanting to volunteer, people don't really know, what would I do? How would I interact? And a lot of that, I believe, is I see it as my job to almost re-educate or to inform people and go, this is nothing to be afraid of. This is something that we can help equip you with, but this is definitely a need and almost a responsibility that we have to serve. So that part is really the integration in the community. So it's making people aware, making sure that our folks get out to stuff. We've got individuals that are volunteering, that are attending churches, that are, working at local businesses. So that's the whole idea of that integration, but not just for the sake of it, but to really say we're caring, we're empowering you, we're taking you to the next level. And then the final part we say is giving a voice to their needs. And one thing I love about Connecticut, probably the thing that really excited me when I first started with Mosaic, was we do something called Dream Catchers. And it's a self-advocacy group that's actually hosted at Bethany Lutheran Church here in Cromwell. Once a month, the group will get together, and that group is literally the individuals across Connecticut that we serve that are available, they're able to come. So we'll have folks that maybe drive out from the New London, from as far as wherever they're able to come. And it's a group that's really supported by our staff, but it's self-run by individuals. So we just elected in November new officers, so a new president. So we'll talk about self-advocacy issues. We'll talk about legislative changes that are impacting our individuals. One of the first meetings I went to, we were talking about, they were saying, well, this is the problem with the state. We didn't have a state budget at the time. And our individuals were saying, well, this isn't good. Look at the impact this is going to have on us. And we were discussing it at our tables. And
this is with people that are living in group homes.
Yep.
They themselves have intellectual disabilities.
Yeah. Okay. So it's entirely led and run by those people. Our staff will be present for transport and to facilitate. That's pretty much it, which is the beauty of it, So we'll have our minutes, our agenda read. And then as we were talking about this particular issue, someone had mentioned, well, there's a rally at the state capitol tomorrow. And we had individuals saying, right, well, I'm going to that tomorrow. I want to go to that tomorrow. For me, it was such a beautiful, empowering moment to see individuals stand up and recognize who they were, the power that they had to represent themselves, and then the ability just to go out and say, well, I'm going to protest tomorrow. Let's go stand together. Let's make sure we can make a difference. And for me, it was the point where Mosaic became bigger than itself for me, if that makes sense.
Sure,
it was suddenly something that we have released you to now, or empowered you, or almost like I said with the foundation of Mosaic, giving you permission to say, if this is your passion, this is your right, this is what you deserve. And we're not just fighting for you, we're saying you even have the right to go and make yourself heard. And that giving a voice part, the third part of what we do at Mosaic, was what was so powerful for me to say, this is, when I talk about community development, it has to be representative of the people in that community, So when I say we're working with a church or working with a group of people, I need to ask those people, what are your passions? Because that's the only way we're going to know what's going to make us better, if you can live that purpose.
How does it work best with a congregation, with a church? I mean, is it, where you've got a group home that's in geographic close proximity to a congregation, and then you find out what are the gifts, and is that kind of the best match, or how does it work?
I always like starting with individuals. I think it's easy to say, well, I'd love for a church to adopt a group home. We've had that in the past with great success. Rejoicing Spirits, a great program where there's an inclusive environment for individuals to attend a church and really feel supported. But I think, again, the most sustainable way to do it is to really start at a grassroots level and say to individuals within a church. And it might start off by presenting to a group of people, but I'm not trying to get a group to pitch in. I'm trying to get the one or two people that are here that your heart starts beating a little faster when I talk about this, and you say, that's something that I can get behind. That's what I've been looking for. I've been looking for a way to live this gospel that I believe in into my community. How do I do that? There's opportunities where I've kind of served, but what you've said is that's what I can get behind. And my job is really to say, great, here's how you can do it. You know, so it really depends on the person. It might be someone that says, this is a way that I can support from a, just a support type of role, or someone who says, I want to interact with these individuals like heavily. What do I do? To the point that they may even say, I want to come work for Mosaic and spend time in a home, or I'd love to volunteer and visit once a month and check in and form close bonds with a group of individuals that live local to me. There's a lady that lives about 1.5 miles from our group home, and has started getting involved in just visiting with them just regularly.
She just comes over and
it's her thing that is
visits.
Yeah, and it's for her. It was, I want my kids even to realize that this is our community. And I think in the past we've been quite hidden in our communities, which is great in a way because we've been just focused on serving the people that we do. But I really think true justice would be to say, stand up and say, this is who we are. This is what we represent, and allow our communities to partner with that. So to go back to your question of how would you approach it with a church, I would say there's individuals here that have a passion for this, and we haven't given them permission to just live it out. So it's not about, do you fit into this box? Can you serve on this level? Can you tick where you would like to serve? It's going back to the really core of, what do you believe your passion is? Like, how do you feel that you can live out this gospel in your community? And then saying, here's a million ways you can do it with Mosaic,
Interesting way to go about it. So basically you could come into a congregation and give some kind of presentation, and what you're looking for is those 1, 2, or 3 people that come up to you afterwards and going, I am so excited about this. And that's the beginning point. And that may lead down the road to a connection with a larger body, but you want to start with those individuals.
And I would be arrogant to say, if you came up to me and said that, to say, okay, cool, here's what you can do.
Right.
Because for me, you provide the answer. Because
so I would say,
I'm trying to
I play the harmonica. Is there a group home that I would love to go for 1 hour a month?
Because you living that passion is what's sustainable. That's how I can eventually not have a job anymore. Because you just live what is natural to you. That's my goal.
So how did you get into this work?
So I always had a passion for, having grown up in church and served in the community, served different population groups, I always had a passion for direct care. I was working primarily with at-risk youth, kids and youth. That was where my heart was at. And doing the direct care, it really ties in with what we were just talking about. I got to a point where I realized there's so much more we could do if we could just see the bigger picture. So rather than, well, we don't have the money to do that. Well, the place across the road, I'm pretty sure, would happily partner with us and let us come do it for free, a few hours a week or whatever. And it got to that point where I saw what we're trying to do here, we can get so focused on, but there is so much more out there that would be willing to help us, would be 100% on board, but we haven't asked, we haven't ventured out there, we haven't given them permission to come into our world. And that was how it grew for me, doing the more sort of program side of things, to saying, well, I want to build some bridges with the community. And I also saw that the power of unity, the power of coming together. And that was how I ended up doing the more sort of community relations type style of stuff. I also believe in that power of connection, that like relationship builds muscle. And that as we get together, just like you do in a church, as you get together and you kind of feel out who we are, and we discover ourselves and we discover one another, and we're suddenly so aware of your needs and not just my, selfish kind of needs, it just empowers us to be more than who we ever thought we could be. So that really just resonated with me. And
so you started working with young people, and there was a church connection. And so people listening to this are going, his accent, it doesn't quite sound like he's from Boston. Was that here, or where was that?
So I was born and raised in London, in England. Started doing a lot of it out there, and actually I'd come out to America on holiday and stuff. Sorry, vacation, as you say out here. But I had ended up in California working at a summer camp with the Salvation Army at the time, serving sort of kids and youth through that. And ended up traveling across America, met my wife, who is now my wife, and we got married, and then eventually moved out to California. a few years later. We lived in London, New York, Toronto, Canada, and then California, and then now Connecticut. So that's how we ended up here. And really, it's just been this journey of chasing God's plan for us, figuring out what is our purpose, why are we here, along with just exploring the world and discovering his people. That's like my passion, and connecting people along the way, and just literally following him and saying, okay, cool, we'll do what's next. And for me, the impact that's had in my life and how it's changed my life is kind of what I feel today is I get to do that for somebody else. You know, whether it's an individual we serve at Mosaic, or whether it's someone out in the community who has no idea about what Mosaic does, and I get to be, you know, the connector of the two. For me, that's a privilege. That's the best privilege to have. Because you're helping people discover their purpose, you're empowering people. And I can't even take any credit for it, because Mosaic were already doing what they were doing before I came along, you know, and you were out there living your passion and trying to figure out your passion and purpose before I came along. I just get to see this constant marriage of like two amazing things that I believe God really planned. So.
And you've been here a year and a half, year?
Not even. 6 months, 7 months.
6 months. And so what's your title, your role? What, you know?
So I'm the community relations officer for Connecticut, which essentially is the community relations piece. So that could be from raising awareness, to trying to raise funds, to raising, we say, friends and volunteers. I really see it as building bridges and partnerships. We talk about those partnerships help us create meaningful lives. So when we say a meaningful life is so important for the individuals we serve, it's not just meeting those basic needs. So that's my job, is to almost enrich the lives of the people we support. So whether it's out getting donations of in-kind or, you know, experiences that our individuals can go on, whether it's raising the funds so that we can build the things we need in the homes to make their lives better, whether it's finding volunteers that will come out and build those deep, intimate relationships that for me represent Christ in so many ways, but just give our individuals that freedom, you know, to live the life that they feel they are meant to live. In all those kind of ways, I see myself, yes, doing community relations in the very typical sense, but really I see it as I'm trying to enhance every part of our programming by engaging the community, by building those partnerships. So whatever works, yeah.
And you do that here in Mosaic, here in Connecticut.
Yeah.
But Mosaic is not just a Connecticut organization.
No, we're technically international. We're in about 10 different states in America, but we have a great international program in Africa that works in Tanzania, mostly, and does the same thing out there, but we're empowering local communities, partnering with services out there to do the same thing. So the mission is the same across Mosaic, but yeah.
And there's a church connection.
Yeah, so we started out as a social ministry organization of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. That's how we were founded. That's how we started out. And we still have that very strong structural connection to the church. And I think as we've evolved and moved through time and had a name change actually along the way, sometimes we've lost that. We were originally Bethphagy Mission, Martin Luther Homes. So people might recognize those names, at least in my experience, have recognized those names more than Mosaic, but nothing's changed. It's the same homes, it's the same individuals, and sometimes the same staff that are serving. It's just been an evolution of who we are. But it's a very key part of our DNA, I would say, is the relationship with the church, but more so than that, just the character of who we are and why we do what we do. I talked about embracing God's call. That's really why we do what we do. It's not something that we're just meeting as a social service organization. We believe this is something much bigger than us that we get to play a part in, and you'll feel that culture.
And so if somebody's interested and they want to connect with you and Mosaic, what's the best way to do that?
I'd say the best way would probably be to go online. Of course, they can call me, and I guess you'll probably have my contact details on there. Call me, email me, whatever. But to find out information about Mosaic, mosaicinfo.org is our website. There's a lot of information on there, as well as our Facebook page. You can find that information. A really cool thing that we have coming up is our annual event that we do. We call it our Laugh Out Loud Comedy Night. It's a raising awareness event. It's a raising funds event, but it's also just a great night out And we do that at the Hilton in Hartford this year. It's at the end of April, Friday, April the 27th. So you can actually go online, and even for folks who are kind of interested in finding out more about Mosaic, we'll have our individuals be sharing some of their stories there, as well as just having a good night out, and maybe even bringing some friends to say, this is something I think you'd be interested in, but without it being too overwhelming. It's a great way to kind of get involved. So that's online. You can get that. You find out more information about that too.
And it's called Laugh Out Loud, which
Laugh
would
Out Loud.
suggest almost like it's a comedy improv night.
Yep. So it's actually a night that we've done for probably 5 years, maybe longer. And it's a comedy night. So we have professional comedians that come in and do stand-up routines. We'll have raffle prizes. It's a sit-down 3-course meal. You know, it's at the Hilton in Hartford. You get your parking included. It's a great night. We've had people that come year after year after year. It's a great way for us to present ourselves to the community, but also a great way for us to even have people just find out more about who we are, what we do, what we represent. It's something that we're very proud of here in Connecticut. It's fascinating for me because I'm on this journey of chasing what God has for us, like as a family, as an individual. So for me, it's always been a journey. So there's no sort of, this is what I believe and this is the end of it. And I think, and obviously I'm still figuring out life in many, I don't have the wisdom that you do or many other people would do. So for me, it's this journey that I'm on, but I think that's allowed me to say that we don't know what we're doing almost as a society. We're constantly evolving, we're constantly growing, we're constantly changing, almost too quick for many of us. And I feel like unless we're in that conversation, even as a church, unless we're in that conversation in the community, even as a non-profit that can often become quite focused on our mission, unless we're out there in the community having our finger on the pulse, so to speak, and we're talking to people, and we're understanding what organizations are doing and where people feel, and even the individuals that we serve, what do you want? Where are you going? Unless we have those kind of deeper conversations, we're going to just keep doing what we're doing. And it's not really an evolution as it is just sort of a general disintegration. And it is what it is. You know, we don't get to build strategically towards something. So that's like my passion, my heart is, I can't make this something myself. It's going to take a whole bunch of everyone finding out their purpose, figuring it out, and then living it to the full. So how do I do that? Because that's the only way Mosaic is going to, and it's not really about Mosaic, to be perfectly honest. It's the only way that the individuals we serve are going to have the life that they deserve, or the life that God planned for them. Is that if I say, well, God, you didn't plan for me just to be a community relations officer to raise some money and raise some awareness, and then hopefully we do okay, better than we did last year. That's not giving the individuals what they deserve. So it's got to be something so much bigger than that, and it's going to take the right people in our community to do that. So that's what I see my role as, is you've got to go out there and find those people. And it means there's a lot of people that say, nope, that's not for me. And so be it. The last thing I would want would be to force a round peg into a square hole. Like, my thing is, there are people out there that are passionate about this, and they would love the opportunity to partner with this or to serve these individuals, just like the people that do it every day working for Mosaic. So how do we connect the two? That's my challenge that I get to embrace.
It's a wonderful challenge.
Yeah, I love it. I love being in a new place. For me, it lets me explore people, what drives them, what scares them, and I get to understand more about what God wants to do here in this community and how I get to play a part. It's a great experience for me. So
good.
I can't complain.
Thank you for doing it. You're very articulate about your faith. Mm-hmm. Where does that come from? Where did you learn that?
I grew up in church, but you can probably say just as much as anyone, that doesn't really mean anything. So for me, it was more a religion. When I was 18 and I was about to go off and do my own thing, figure out life and go explore and travel the world, I had an encounter with God, a personal encounter with God that for me transformed the way I saw life. And that's a whole story in itself, but essentially I went to like a church youth camp, same one I've been going to growing up, having a good time living. And I grew up in a church that for me was it was really interesting. So at Convocation, how we talked about things that were initially a movement that can become a monument, which is okay to an extent, but then if we lose all movement, then we're nothing. And I grew up in a church that was very much sort of a monument, and I saw that that's who God was, and that was my relationship with God. So I kind of moved on my own, did my own thing, lived my own life, but church was this kind of separate thing. And at 18, I kind of realized, well, I'm kind of investing some time in church. Like, and to be honest, if this is not really real, it's a waste of my time. And I was at this point where I had the freedom now to go, well, I'm just going to do my own thing. And I remember being at this youth camp, and it was the last night of the camp, and I had no plans. I wasn't like, seeking God or trying to figure out my life. I was ready to go off and do my own thing. And I remember in this meeting, just kind of asking God in my head, I realized it suddenly clocked that I had my whole life ahead of me, and I didn't need to do this. So why am I wasting time like going to these meetings, doing this stuff, like turning up every week, like, and it feels good, but it doesn't feel as good as this other stuff that I'm doing, to be perfectly honest. And I was like, so then it's probably a waste of time. Like, is it real or it isn't? And it was that dialogue in my head that started this sort of conversation in me. This, what I would say it's a prayer now, really, in me, and it realized itself in this encounter with God in that meeting, where I realized, and it's hard to explain all of that like this, but I realized this is real. And I remember telling God, almost, if this isn't real, great, but then I'm going to go do my thing. I'm not going to sit on the fence. But if it is real, it's going to consume everything that I know and everything that I am, and it's going to radically transform the way I think about life and my relationships and my habits and everything. And that was the turning point for me at 18, where I realized, oh wow, this is real. Oh, this is bigger than real. This is eternal. This is not, And then that started a journey for me, and that was 12 years ago. That started a journey for me on figuring out what does that really mean. Because like I said, now it meant that the monument of faith that I'd been introduced to was almost irrelevant. But I knew there was something more. So I kind of literally went on this journey, and it was an international journey in a way, because I'm now in Connecticut, of just following God and saying, well, what does that mean? What do you have for me? And I was obsessed with purpose. I didn't know what purpose. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Everyone around me was very straightforward in how you sort of pursue your career and what you do. And I was supposed to be an architect, and I was like, but that's not my purpose. I could do it. I loved it, but it wasn't what I was going to do. And I worked every other job under the sun, but always I had this underlying, I would say, calling of, I knew, God, you did something crazy in me that night. Like that, it just switched the path that I was on. That's really the beginning of the journey. The rest is a 12-year story, of what God's been doing. But that was really where my faith became a movement from the monument that I was kind of raised in. And I can't really stop it since then, to be honest. It's why we moved out to Connecticut pretty much on faith. We had no idea what we were doing when we came out here. I didn't have a job, didn't have anything when we stepped out. I quit my job in California to move out here. And it was, we were embracing what we felt God was calling us to do. And it's been incredible since we've been here to see how God's just provided, taken care of us, revealed himself. So for me, it's huge. It's huge. It's not like a small thing. Like, yeah, I go to church. Like, I get it. It's everything who I am. Like, I'm unrecognizable, which is probably terrifying for you because you're looking at me, but I'm recognizable from the person that I used to be. Totally different, transformed. So for me to have that, I can't just carry on and just be like, well, yeah, it was good, Like, church has been good for me. It's helped me. No, look, I know where I came from to be where I'm at today. There has to be a God. It's almost that. And I know it very personally. It's a very personal relationship. It's very real for me. There's nothing you can do to convince me otherwise. It's what I live, it's what I breathe, it's what I experience in my family, my daily life, it's what I've experienced with favor at work and everything in between. So it's a huge part for me. Yeah,
it shows.
Yeah. I could talk about it forever. It's everything that I live and breathe. There's, for me, the purpose of life. Like I said, I was obsessed with purpose. What's the point of life? Why are we doing this? I had a friend who committed suicide, a roommate that committed suicide. Actually, while I was in America, it was the night I met my wife, and ended up going back to London a couple of weeks later. And I was a Christian, right, at the time, but it under the label of Christian. But suddenly now I've got questions to ask, because it was a suicide and we didn't know what happened. We still don't know. He didn't leave a note. He didn't do anything. He was supposed to go out for drinks with friends and watch the football. Happy lad, like lived a good life. But he rode to the train station and threw himself in front of a train. And only because of the CCTV that we know that it's a suicide. Otherwise, they assumed it would have been some sort of suspicious circumstances. But left nothing behind. And it made me start questioning, well, because it was so close to me, this has to be something more to this life. It can't just be, well, I'm Christian, so I like believe in being good and having a moral life, and I guess you don't. And some people believe in, life is precious, and some people don't. And you kind of live according to live and let live, and try not to rub each other up the wrong way. And I was like, that doesn't get, like, when you get, and when you get into the nitty gritty of real people, like the work that even Mosaic does and the work that I've been involved with in foster care and stuff, it doesn't work. Like, it doesn't carry you far enough. This whole idea of like, well, just do good, be good. There has to be something more than that, or the whole thing is a pile of rubbish. Like, it's one or the other. And it was that constant tension that I had lived with, knowing I had this incredible encounter with Christ that transformed me. But then I live in this really messy world. In me alone. In me alone, there's enough, to deal with, let alone with what I'm trying to do in the community. That how do I figure out the two? And that journey for me, because I can say I've resolved it, I have resolved it. I live in a total peace with it now.
How is God in that messy stuff? Where do you see God in that?
All up in it more than you would think. That's how I see it.
Because a lot of people describe God as, I see God in a sunset or something, but you're saying God's in the muck.
Yeah, and the only reason I can say that is because I came from the muck. So if it's very easy to say, and I grew up in a great home, great family, I didn't grow up in any ill circumstances in any way, but I know what muck is, and I've lived in the muck. Like, I've embraced the muck and, rolled around in the muck, but I didn't leave the muck and get cleaned up and become a good person and then realize, oh, that's kind of Christ is helping me. And, it wasn't like that. For me, Christ came to the muck. So when I say Christ is in the muck, I know he's out there, and people are going, well, you don't know that, Tim. Well, how else would I wouldn't know if he didn't come visit me when I was in the middle of that muck. So that's how I know he cares about it. That's why I know he's all up in it, because I wasn't seeking him when he came and found me, and I've done plenty of things in my life to throw away carelessly the grace of God. But the very definition of grace means that he still helped me. I'm still here today. Even I was never the type to get married. I was not the type to be in a relationship. It was a waste of time and money for me. That's what I would say. And then to be married now with, a kid and another one on the way, and to be really living what I feel is where God wants us to be. I'm in Connecticut. Like, we left London, we left New York, we left Toronto, we left LA. Now we're in Connecticut.
You left California.
It doesn't make sense.
To Connecticut. Talk about moving to the muck.
Yeah. For me, what excited me the most about Connecticut or New England is that it's often described as being this most unchurched region of America. And we live in New Haven, right? And what I love, I'm obsessed with New Haven as a city. What I love about New Haven is this was a place that was built as almost a haven for Christianity. If you read the history of New Haven, there's two blocks in the center. It's the first planned city in the United States, allegedly. And there's 2 blocks in the center of New Haven around a green. And there's churches planted around those green, and the churches are still there today. And the idea was that the church is in the center, and everything then comes out from that. That's how you build a community. That's how you build a city. So for someone who's passionate about community development, New Haven, I'm obsessed with, because I go, this is the DNA of this city, but yet we don't carry any of that anymore in this city. Even the United States as a nation, you can go further and further, but that fascinates me. So when we came to Connecticut, I started at Mosaic at the beginning of July. There was no state budget, and we didn't have a state budget for 4 months. You can imagine what that does to non-profits like Mosaic. And I would have people say to me, do you think it was such a good idea moving here? You know, and I go, we didn't move here for comfort and, you know, well, we left Orange County. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't that we were coming here hoping for a better life. I was coming here seeking purpose because I believed that God was asking us to come here. And that's a whole separate story. But what everyone else saw as a crisis, I see as opportunity. Here's an opportunity to talk to a whole group of people in New England, or at least in Connecticut, or at least in New Haven, that have lived here for years. Connecticut is seen as such the American dream like 20 years ago, right? These beautiful little suburban communities. But then now people are leaving. Everyone my age is leaving. No one wants to live in Connecticut, apparently. But for me, this is an incredible opportunity to say to people, well, guess what? What you've been doing for 30 years, or let's say 1,000 years, isn't working, is it? You know, it's not working. So I think there has to be something deeper. It's this whole idea of even the charity work that we do. We do good for people. We change people's lives. We make it better. But as a Christian, I believe there's an eternal significance to it too. But if we don't talk about the eternal significance, and I can't say yes to everyone, so I know what you can say, but if we don't talk about the eternal significance, I've wasted my time. Because I've only got so many years here. As far as I know, as far as I believe, I'm not coming back. So I've got one shot at this. So I can sit in my comfort and say, well, I'm blessed, I'm lucky, I'm privileged, I got dealt some good cards, you know. I did good with what I had, and like I should have a good life. Like, or I can go, well, if Christ came to me in the muck and saved me out of the muck. I remember when that happened, I was 18, so my social life was everything to me at 18. And I left this whole group of friends, and I would tell them, hey, I'm not coming to that, you know, that rave that we're doing in that abandoned house or whatever, I'm not coming to that. And they were like, but you organized it. And I go, well, because it's just different now. Like, my motivation is a bit different. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to figure this out. But I couldn't leave my friends. Even though I lived this totally separate approach to life, I couldn't leave my friends. And my thing was, well, why? What? So I have to follow you, but then I don't want to leave them. Like, and it's this idea, well, I think I got what I got from God. The encounter I had with God was for a reason. And it wasn't to abandon my friends and pursue this holy life and, you know, leave them all behind because they didn't get it. Was he did it all for a reason. He saved me out of the muck to do exactly what, you know. So that's the same thing that calls me back to it, that drives me back to it. So it's the same reason I can't just sit and go, well, like, I work in the non-profit sector, pat me on the back and make me feel good about myself. That's not good enough. There's got to be more to it. And that's what keeps driving us to keep taking these steps of faith. And
well,
yeah.
I'm grateful that you are doing it. And I'm sure the folks at Mosaic are as well. Well, good. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thanks for the legacy that I wanted to hear your story too. Mm-hmm. While you're here, I might as well take the opportunity.
You got a deal.